basically the law has created a repeated state of harassment. Not that I'm faulting anybody for this. This is the system that's the problem. One of the important things is we have no enemies. We're not against any people. We understand that the system itself is corrupted. It has been corrupted for longer than America has existed. And America is just another evolution of a faltered, antiquated system. It's based on the alpha, beta relationship of resource control or a class or caste system.
I see.
I could give you I have a specifically prepared statement to explain that
would be great.
That most people are looking at the symptoms of the problem. But if you want to address the true problem, then you have to address the source of the problem. And I just stated what it was, but I'll explain it in this mannerism. When you take the divine right of self-determination and our collective cooperative self-rule away from the many and you give it to the few that are easily corrupted, you create a game of king of the hill. Now, every person needs to understand, as participants in a system that's based on that there's power, privilege, and prestige that exists within the top of the hill. And it's not a king, it's an army. So you have to create your own group of like-minded or visually acceptable affiliates in order to take the hill and reap such benefits. Otherwise, you're in a downtrodden class below that point of power. That creates every form of bigotry, racism, sexism, religionism, nationalism, etc. that we have in our society. The only way to solve that is a simple equation where I'm going to give you a mathematical equation that seems like it's off the point, but it's a metaphor. If you take a jar and you fill it with marbles or gumballs and you ask a random amount of people to guess at how many marbles or gumballs there are in the jar, and then you calculate what the average of all of these guesses are, you come 7% off center. That's what a false democracy produces. Now, if you take the same jar of gumballs and you get an exact amount of people, such as 200, let's just give it an exact number, and you let them all guess, and then you add all the numbers together and divide it by 200, it reduces from 7% down to 0.02%. And so you basically get the consistency. Now, some people will say that something like direct democracy wouldn't work because it would oppress the minority with the majority, but that's a false equation. That's exactly what's happening when you have 437 people deciding for 380 million. Or even worse, you look at it at a global level and you have 15,000 top deciding for 8 billion. What's corruptible? You have a very small group, very associated to corporations, oppressing everybody, but they're not at fault. The system is at fault and everybody's mad at them because they're playing the false game better than everybody else, which is the problem because it's not just Trump or Kamala or anybody in Washington, but I know right over here on La Cienega, there's a liquor store. I won't mention which one because, I don't want to bring heat to anybody, but there's a liquor store where there's 3 guys that work 6 days a week, 14 hours a day. And I asked them after knowing them for several years, I said, how much do you work? And they told me, and I said, that's super illegal. And you could go to the Employment Development Division and complain, and they're like, well, we're illegals. And I'm like, that's completely messed up, And he goes, no, you want to know what's more messed up? Is the guy that owns the liquor store used to be an illegal. So this hierarchical reality that we have is at the root of all the problems. Now, there's a fine line, or since we're here at the beach, a line in the sand that should never be crossed. It's when you persecute the most indigent, most disenfranchised, most handicapped, mentally ill, senior citizen, parents that cannot afford the level of stability that their children need. And look at these vans in here, these buses, these aren't necessarily people with no money. Okay, some of these vehicles can run hundreds of thousands of dollars. But rent in one of those buildings compared to when I first moved here would have been about $1,200 for a 2-bedroom, maybe as high as 13 or 14. I lived on Rialto. I paid $840 for a 1,700 square foot 2-bedroom apartment right off of Abbott Kinney. Now are $6,000? Come on, there's a point. My paycheck, the majority of people's paycheck, well, maybe not mine so much, but most people's paycheck went from $8, $10, $12 an hour after 27 years I've been in LA to $15, $17, $20 an hour. Yeah, and it sounds like, oh my God, you doubled their paycheck. But the fruit on the stands, the meat on the stands, the housing on the stands, the cost of vacations, hotel rooms, everything else, all of these different things that we make up life, the cost of a vehicle, didn't go up 100% like our wages did. Went up 6, 7, 800%. So the people at the top making the most. But don't be mad at them. They're just playing the game better than everybody else. What has to end is the game. And the game has to go from competition, chaos, and control, and conflict to cooperation, community, empathy, understanding, unity. And that's what has to change. And when you go after homeless people, you have gone after this line in the sand, because homeless people are microcosm of the macrocosm. We are as diverse as all of society. We have gays, straight, men, women, white, black, Hispanic, handicapped, geniuses, right? For 1,000 different reasons from previously every class of society that become homeless. And why do people put up such a front towards homeless people in general? Not because they hate them. They fabricate the hate around they're scared they're going to become one of them. And the fact of the matter is I'm a unique homeless person out here. I actually own land. I actually own a business, you know, and I mean, I'm a healer, and I'm opening up a healing institute. But I can't move on to the land right now, once again, because of government regulations that are inhibiting me, and cost relationships to me being able to even just level the land that I could live on it. But that doesn't matter. I'm not complaining about my circumstance. I'm just simply saying, hey, I need to do it this way for a little while because I can't afford $6,000 a month. It's ridiculous. And I'm not going to go live in a ghetto because they want to nominalize everybody that isn't rich. It didn't work in the tenement system in New York. They decided that if you put all the homeless people together, it creates crime and the lack of upward mobility. You have to integrate everybody at every class of society. Mind you, by the way, rich people who have maids, you really want your maids traveling 6 hours every single day just to come and work for you? Or wouldn't it be better if they lived in that little maid house that you're now renting out for $5,000 a month to some young artist kid that has an upper middle class parent that will pay their bills? I mean, that's a complaint, and it shouldn't be targeted on those people either. But, you know, we have like 7 times as many uninhabited homes in the United States as we do homeless people. 7 times, because I want to make money off of my Airbnb. Hello? So what we're addressing here is we're challenging the foundation of the system. And the system that we're presenting isn't a threat to the well-being and self-preservation of the people involved. We're gonna make sure that the human mind, the human race, the social contract that exists between all of us changes in such a way where poverty and struggle will never happen for anybody. So the level of security that we give or present in a cooperative thing, mind you, remember, I'm a guy that worked in AI. I was a head of research and development. I had a terabyte chip come across my desk 20 years ago. And I had all this information about robotics, nanotechnology, 3D printing, or what's called additive manufacturing. And if you think about the idea of additive manufacturing, 3D printing at a level of nanotechnology where nanobots are putting molecular structures into place at a subatomic visual level, and you could fabricate through 4 different polymers and different adhesive strengths a Tesla in your garage, this is where technology is going. I could invent a robot that will do every service job on Earth. Not one robot, several thousand, just like there are several thousand service jobs. Not one of them needs to be AI. All of that technology could have existed not only now, but in a mechanical sense without computers. Jules Verne was talking about it in the 1870s. This has been repressed by our system, which is basically, and interesting to say this, it's basically a mental algorithm being processed with these computers that's gone haywire, an AI that does not have existence outside of our thinking and our beliefs and our accepted rule or social contract we have with one another. And all we have to do is change that. So like Jesus, like Buddha, like Socrates, like Muhammad, like Moses, who were all homeless activists or civil rights activists, if you really think about what they did, we're standing here like Nelson Mandela, like Mahatma Gandhi, like Martin Luther King, and saying, look, we are going to have a evolution. Part of that is we're against violence. We're not having a war to replace the old bosses with new bosses. We're saying the old bosses just need to literally vacate their seats because their seats are the cause of the entire human problematic condition. And if you take the disease away, the symptoms leave. It's just how things work. It's how they've always worked. And it's why this system has been built upon empire after empire after empire, creating what could be considered a psychological conspiracy that's so deep it's ingrained into every human being by everything they're taught about the strong will survive. You better have your own back because no one else will, which is all philosophical constructs that have been built upon other ones for tens of thousands of societal years that have all been antiquated. Perhaps they were good when we were seeking to become the apex predator on this planet. Maybe they served humanity. But when we stop proving our dominance over the planet and we start proving our dominance over each other, then it's like shooting yourself in the foot. You can't go after homeless people. There's an oath that these people take in office. Part of the social programming is that they take the oath, but then they function within a society where everybody's out to be at the top. Even those at the top are fighting all the time to preserve their position. And it's built into all of our psyches. So we all collectively have to come together and say, hey, time for a change, man.
Now this morning I saw the police come and they gave you a ticket.
Yep. Every single day, man.
You've been getting one every single day?
Almost. I mean, 2 actually, because I own this car as well.
Oh, I see.
So yeah, 2. And they, from what I understand, they've stepped it up since we decided to stand against them. But you know what they say, poking the bear.
Yes, because I saw it on Facebook yesterday. They were talking about it, and maybe they saw it as well. That's why they started to enforce it today. And I asked the officer, you know, what's going to happen. They said at one point they're going to start enforcing. So tow us.
Yeah, so that's in violation of the law, by the way, because you can't retroactively create a bill that forces me to lose my property without compensating me for my property. So you're basically saying, we're going to steal your land retroactively of you purchasing it without informing you. You know, and so I mean, I'm up against two sides here in this because I bought this prior to it's a pre-1997 vehicle, but it's diesel. So according to carbon emission rules that were put in place in 2018, now something I purchased, paid taxes on the purchase of, registered it. These are all taxations without representation. This is a violation of the origins of our country, a violation of the Declaration of Independence, a violation of every single person that fought in our original revolution, bled and died. Literally, they've created rules that go against the nature of America in its origins. I mean, one vote, one person. Not one corporation dominating everybody else. According to Mussolini, when he was asked what the definition of fascism is, he says it's when corporations and governments congeal. That's fascism, or corporatism in modern American terminology. But it's fascism. It's not Trump's or Kamala's or Biden's fault. It's psychologically induced programming that's on all of us, you know, and it's time for it to just come to an end. And we can, and I'll give you these words, and we can have a human paradigm shift. I'll say one last thing. Out of respect for Martin Luther King, I too have a dream that 1,000 years from now, parents are reading a bedtime story to their children about a society of our time with the boomers and X-Geners and millennials and Ys and Zs and everything else that took one on the chin, paid the credit card debts back for 10,000 years of deforestation, 10,000 years of turning our fertile lands into salt beds and deserts, and fix the earth so that those parents can sit there and tell those bedtime stories to their children, as opposed to us going back to a feudal point, back to a point where only a handful of humans survive the environmental nuke that is going off as we speak, the economic nuke that is going off as we speak. We can stop all of this. I mean, some people I know say, it can't be, it's already too late. I'm like, look, are we dead? Because the only time it's too late is when we're dead.
And are you prepared if they do come in tow? What are you going to do?
I have a lawyer, Allison Margolin, and she's bringing in the NAACP. I have a First Amendment right that precedes all other laws. The First Amendment right is to assemble, to redress the government. I'd like to see one judge in this country, any judge, go after the First Amendment, because when they do, they go after the freedom of the press, they go after the freedom of religion. Go ahead, come after my right to assemble, to redress my government because of some city ordinance.
Is that what this is here then?
This is a protest site.
Oh, I see.
Okay? This is not a homeless person camping, but according to the laws behind protests, I could possess or actively pursue that which I am protesting for. So, am I camping? Yes. On public property. This doesn't belong to Santa Monica. This belongs to the people. I'm the people. Santa Monica, although incorporated, mind you, once again back to what fascism is by definition, will claim that it is Santa Monica's property. Santa Monica doesn't exist, and those people that work in City Hall or in Los Angeles County or California State or the federal government, we don't exist as their subordinates. This is part of the problem. They are our employees, and they will not infringe upon our right to use our duly unalienable rights to exist on the land in which we are citizens in.
Now that flyer, do you have that flyer?
I do. I have a copy of it. Don't mind the mess, man.
Okay, I'll wait for you here.
Here's a couple of them.
Okay.
This is going in print though, right?
Yeah, it is. Would you like to talk about this flyer?
Yeah, well, I mean, it basically, what we're doing comes from this. The Supreme Court ruled against sleeping on public property. Now, according to our understanding of the intent of the laws, you cannot regulate human behavior because I can't control the fact I need to eat, breathe, drink, sleep, right? So you can't regulate that. You can't say where and when I can sleep. And they're saying, and they can't legally, without violating civil rights, target homeless people, say specifically this is about homeless people, because it's called selective prosecution. Again, another law that they cannot cross. So if they're going to outlaw sleeping in public, does that mean they're going to stop every truck driver? Or are they going to stop every person tired on the road that needs to pull over? Are they going to stop every single family in their camper vehicle? No, they're not. And that's called selective prosecution. So they're violating all kinds of laws in order to push something that they should never even try to push. And they think that we're all junkies and alcoholics and whatever, or mental patients. No, that represents about 10%, maybe 15% of the population of homeless people, like the rest of society. Now, I'll honestly say something most people won't even think about. Do you know who the criminals are amongst? And I'm not saying as a microcosm, we don't have criminals in our 100 percentile, but you know who the most of the criminals are? Because criminals steal things and can afford a place to live. They're hiding inside houses.
How long has this protest been going on?
October 29th.
You started.
We would have gotten here earlier, but I mean, it's hard to put yourself in the line of fire. And it's hard to organize everything that needs to. In fact, we could use help with our website right now, just getting it up and running.
Is it up yet?
It exists.
It's the one that's on the.
But I'm not a web designer,
I
so
see.
I mean, I'm a little bit like, I'm not computer illiterate, but I probably need help with some of the organization. I mean, one person can't do it all. We have to do this as a collective.
Right.
I mean, what we're going to seek is the human race standing together and saying, hey, it's time to just do it. And if we represent anything at all in the simplest form of explanation, is just a signpost in the road so that critical mass, or what, if you understand Jane Goodall, 100th monkey, can actually occur. Most of these people, or at least close to half of these people, are going, I get it. When are we going to get started? And so we're saying to the world, it's time. Let's start now. Why not? There you go. I'm not even going to pull one off, but I'm going to show you that they're on both.
Oh my God. You got them on both?
Yeah. And all the way up here too. And this is just from under a month of being here. And, I could leave. Also my car. I could leave. And I could do this little, what, we can jokingly call the hippie shuffle. But the reality is you have to take a stand somewhere. And I'm not just calling on, the people that are the hippies or counterculture or, intellectuals that understand this. I'm calling on the police officer that wants this to be a better world. We can make it a better world, but we have to do it together, not see each other as enemies. And that's what I'm saying. Honestly, I'm not going to say I'm a fan of Trump, okay? I'm not really a fan of Kamala either. The fact of the matter is I was one of two Bernocrats in 2016 that ran against Kamala Harris for the United States Senate, and I mean, I can show you a picture and you'll be like, wait a minute, that's you? and the fact of the matter is I actually firmly believe that if I could sit in a room with either of them, I can show them why doing the right thing will fulfill their inner need for acceptance and love. You know what I mean? It'll foster their narcissism and their ego so that they feel good about themselves, and instead of people, trying to, lambast them with all kinds of negativity, they'll be like, oh my God, people love me. But in order for people to love you, you have to be right by people. You have to do right by people. And I'm sorry, but those positions of power are too influenced by the people around them. Do you remember when George Bush Jr. was running for president and he stood in front of a room of Fortune 500 people and said, "You are my people," and then he came out on stage and said, "The people"? Well, what people was he talking about? The people in the room or the people that he is running to be president of? That's the problem with giving the power to a few. We're all influenced by the people around us. If you surround yourself with a bunch of rich people, then they're going to be the ones influencing you. That's all there is to it. And they're all trying to self-preserve. Just like, a person out here that works 2 jobs to barely scrape by. Just like anybody in a vehicle. I mean, this is why this is a microcosm of a macrocosm. Our society is driven by a series of rules that are created in order to preserve the status quo, which means keeping the top at the top, keeping everybody else from reaching the top, even though the pure irony of this is the system keeps going forward, but who's at the top changes. So even the people at the top that are preserving the system, they're not preserving it in their own self-interest, because they will be replaced just in our lifetime. The dot-commers and the computer software generation has replaced all the Rockefellers and Rothschilds and J.P. Morgans and Carnegies of the past. But the same thing's happening today as happened in the 1880s, 1890s, where it's run rampant in one direction of corporatism upward towards the top with trickle down, which means flood up, that Reagan put into place, that Democrats and Republicans have both been backing, because they're psychologically induced by a system that means they must preserve themselves at all costs without regard to who else is trying to preserve themselves. And that creates conflict, and it's because we live in a system that's based on conflict. We got to change that, and I'm calling to every single human being alive to stand for themselves, to stand with us, because we're not against them, and we're not threatening their security. We're guaranteeing the security of every single human being alive. So I did speak with the officer coordinator between the homeless issues, the sergeant, and I presented to him that we can cooperate, we can work together. I mean, this isn't about us versus them. Even though they have the city ordinance in place, it doesn't really matter in the sense of whether or not we could cooperate and work together. They can understand and accept the fact that the First Amendment transcends all other laws. It's the supreme law of the land, and cordon off us an area where homeless activists can assemble and participate in their First Amendment right to redress the government and the Constitution by assembling on public property. So, let's save us all a bunch of time in the courts. You're not going to scare me off. I'm 57 years old. I've been an activist for 45 years. I went on one of the longest hunger strikes in human history to help legalize 215 in the state of California at 79 days without food. So, we don't need to go to a point where you think it's a battle between us as to who could endure. I'm going to care about the human race until my life comes to an end here, and then if there is an afterlife, I will continue to care about the human race. So you guys are here to protect and to serve. You want this to be a better and safer world, then work with us to make it a better and safer world. Your method is making it dangerous for homeless people, making a conflict exist between one class of society and another. Understand that and work with us, and with our cooperation we can make this safer for not only homeless people, for everybody else, and make us all community instead of warring factions, I guess. So here, it's really simple. I could explain a lot of these things, but if you want solutions to the problems, we probably have 20 solutions for every single problem amongst the millions and millions of people that are working on solutions. But as of yet, we're still in the old dichotomy of cut down forests, decimate mines, and drill for oil. Let me say it like this. If I say to people, we need to plant 3 trillion trees, which is basically what you hear from scientists, what you hear from the people, environmentalists. Everybody just kind of does this number. That's a mighty big mountain. Good luck with that. That's the response from most everybody, because it seems overwhelming. What can I do about it? I'm just one person. But what if I look at you and I say 413? You might look at me and go, what do you mean? Now all of a sudden you're talking about, a reasonable number. Yeah, I could teach you how to take cuttings in about 15 minutes. It takes about 3 weeks to 3 months to gain a good root. So if our government were to finance a national holiday, 2 of them, opposite 1 to 3 months, where you can come with a voucher saying you participated on both ends of this and you get paid for the day's work. 413 trees for 7 billion people. And in 3 months, we could reverse deforestation. 10,000 years. The same could go just with producing a tetrahydrocannabinoid or a pot for hemp, because there's 250,000 industrial applications. So if we convert from fossil fuels, steel, and wood to just hemp, not only will it only cost us somewhere between 1/5 and 1/80th based on the use, but a hemp plant produces as much oxygen as you produce carbon dioxide, and if we produced enough to replace petroleum, wood, and steel, and mind you, you can replace all of petroleum, wood, and steel, 100% of their resources, actually in better ways with a better resource. But it's not, something that rich people can get super rich off, and it becomes a farm-based economy again, which means profits and wealth be shared at a broader spectrum. So, the last point about it's oxygen. So if you're worried about carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, according to the environmental scientists that say if we produce that much hemp globally, 5 years, we could reverse the carbon in the atmosphere and bring back our oxygen levels comparable to the carbon to a state that is carbon neutral to the world. 5 years, not 50 years, not too far out of our reach. Simple solutions.
Yeah. Civic Center structure, right?
No, the civic, the lot.
Yeah.
The lot itself. Yeah, you see it. He's right next to